Okay, so I'm going to show you another way to approach frosty trees. So this is a little bit of Bockingford. Just going to pop some water on. I've got a mix here of cobalt blue and dioxazine violet, or purple. Windsor purple would work. Basically you want a nice dark blue. So I'm going with a quite purpley blue. So I'm applying this with my round number 10. And I'm going to get a really nice base. I want this to be nice and dark, so it's going to show the tree up well. It's a little bit dry at the bottom, which is fine because that can be a little bit of snow. Don't really need to be too precise, you just basically want a bit of a flat wash on here. If I just dip in to the violet that's neat, I'm just going to take a little bit of a variety of colour in. So I'm just going to pop a little bit of that through. It's a lovely colour. So I get that showing really nicely. So this time I'm going to go a little bit darker, and I'm going to use a little bit of sepia. And I'm going to come in just at the bottom to create some dark for the bottom of the tree line. It's going to help to accentuate the snow. And this is with a round number 6, and it's pretty much neat sepia paint. I'm going upwards with the dabbing so that it's creating these lovely tree-like shapes, and I want to vary the height of them. So I want some to be bigger, some to be smaller. So they're all a little bit different. So I've got a nice tree line happening there. I'm going to pick up my rigger and come into the sepia. I'm going to pop in some trunks. I'm going to go nice and big. It's still a little bit wet, so it's going to spread out, which is absolutely fine. We'll vary the angles that they're going so that we've got different trees happening. And what I've got here is some white acrylic ink. It's FW ink, and it's really nice and opaque. So I'm just going to undo this and twizzle around because I'm much more comfortable painting downwards to a point. So I'm going to take the lid off and pop in. I'm going to start to come through. So what I want to create now is a few softer lines, and then I'm going to come in and create some harder lines after. So this is now creating a few more frosty trees. So where it's spreading out, that's fine. So I've got some darker trees and I've got some frostier trees. So I'm going to dry that one off. Actually, before I dry off, I've just noticed that these fantastic things are happening at the bottom where you've got some really nice frostiness, and it's spreading out and pushing out on the sepia. So what I'm going to do first, before I dry off, is just with my line writer, pull some of that paint out with a damp brush, so that I'm helping to accentuate that frostiness at the bottom. It's the beauty of acrylic ink, is it does wonderful things. And I've turned the camera off a little bit too soon there. So I can just start to get some really nice frosty effects. I say, okay, so I've dried this off, I've twizzled back round. Got some wonderful effects down here where the ink has spread out. I'm going to dry brush, so keeping it flat loaded the brush up with the acrylic ink, and I'm going to come on and create this effect. Now this is a smooth bit of Bockingford, so on a smooth it doesn't tend to catch as much of a surface, but it still works. I'm going to pop some little bits on, and then with my rigger I'm just going to pull through onto the trees. Now you need to move fairly quickly when you're doing this because it's on a Bockingford and I want to spritz it as well to blend it in. So you just want a few strokes coming down. If you're using a Saunders paper, then that will make it easier. So I've got a spritzer here and I'm just going to spritz that now. So it will need a fair amount of water for that ink to start to spread a little bit. But you want that flow. You don't want it to be too solid. You want the flow for the frostiness. In fact, I can add a few more little bits in. Some of the areas will still be dry because you're only spritzing in certain places. But where you've spritzed, if you can see it's moving, the ink tends to sit a little bit more and has a really nice effect of movement. Just going to spread through. So I'm manipulating more than I would do if I was using watercolour, because you can play a little bit more with the ink. You can also take a little bit of salt on. That will still draw bits of the ink up. So we're going to take some on, sprinkle that in, and then I'm going to let that dry. Okay, so that's nicely dry. So at this point it doesn't look like much, but you have to trust in the process. Not everything can come together all in one go. And part of watercolour is learning that you've got to layer up. So what I'm going to do now is come in back in with the sepia. I'm going to start to break through. The acrylic ink isn't on really thick. If it was on really thick, the paint wouldn't come over it, the watercolour paint, so it's just got a nice layer. And I'm going to now start to add in some trees that are a bit further forward, so I'm not eliminating what I've already done, but this is going to have much more sharpness to it and a bit more depth, and you're going to see that frostiness through. So what I'm creating is the frostiness behind. So I want you to bring the tree trunks up into where you've got these white areas, and you can start to fan out from the main trunks. I have twizzled again upside down because it's just, I find it easier that way. It's just finding the way that works for you. Painting downwards, I can get a much finer point, works much nicer for me. And we're going to paint through some of this white area, so the frostiness is there, but it's there behind. Some of these trees are going to overlap. Try to make every branch a little bit different. Try to make sure you haven't got a pattern happening from one tree to the next. You want it all to be random. You can come a bit further than some of the white if you want as well. So you've got some really nice fine wispy branches. The more you practice at winter trees, the better you will get. This is all about adding depth. If you didn't know any better on that stage that I've just completed, you would think it was an absolute mess and stop there and then. But it's about working it. So what you're going to end up with is a very fine work of dark trunks and branches, and that is already working nicely. Then we're going to take a very fine light version over. So if I just take some of this ink and just pop it into here, it's a bit easier then to bring it out. If you didn't have the acrylic ink and you wanted to use gouache, you could do. That would work perfectly well. So I'm going to firstly come in over some of the dark branches and create light branches. The acrylic ink's got a little bit more of a flow and it's a little bit more opaque than gouache, but gouache would work. It's perfectly fine on your watercolour brushes. You just need to make sure you wash it off and wash it off your palette after. Just building up these layers. You've got that softness behind, the harder frostiness in front. Don't eliminate all the dark. Dark doesn't eliminate all the light, it's just working them together. Some can come in isolation. Just work it through. Then when you come to doing the trunk, I want you to just come down one side. So you're still leaving a little bit of that dark showing, and I want you to do the same side on every tree. And I want you to leave a little bit of dark showing. So you've got a light side and a dark side. Need a really steady hand. And when I turn this around, you'll see how that's working so nicely. So you've got all this frostiness behind as well. You can bring some bits out from those. So I'm looking at these white frosty trees now behind and just adding a little bit more to those. It's just a whole different technique. And it's great to have different ways to do things. That's working really nicely. I'm just going to take a bit of this purpley blue now and just pop in a little bit of shadow. So I'm just running them in a similar direction. It's just enough for that to hold together. So it's a different way of creating those frosty, snowy trees.